Today it's my pleasure to introduce Danish-born photographer and director Casper Sejersen. Amazing to have you here.
Of course, nice to be here.
Thank you. Just to give us a visual, where are you at the moment?
I'm in Copenhagen at a rental studio called The Lab, where I have my own small studio in the same building, which is owned by my very best friend in the whole wide world, Emil.
Nice.
He assisted me even before he had a driver's license. And he runs this amazing studio in Copenhagen, where they have set design department, producers, and 8 different studios. It's the place in Copenhagen.
Very cool. It's sort of like community. Do you feel like you're sort of working in an environment with a sort of a creative community that you want to collaborate with?
Exactly. And I can also see from my point of view that I'm getting kind of more and more clients and editorials to come to Copenhagen instead of traveling because the setup is so nice here. It's very cool.
I'm really excited to have you on the show. Your images tread a brilliant fine line between sexy and subversive. I'm thinking, of course, for example, of your iconic Orgasm Portraits of the cast of the Lars von Trier Nymphomaniac films.
Yeah.
I can't wait to dig deeper into the mind and backstory into the man who created those. Before I even sort of dive into that, I just want to ask a quick question. I've said sort of sexy and subversive. What words would you use to describe your work?
It's weird because I'm doing a project next week.
Yep.
I wrote a mail to the stylist, which is my wife today, and
Amazing.
the set designer, where I use the word sexy. And I hate that word because it can be so on the edge of being something that is cheesy, but I can live with that. I mean, I'm attracted to things that feels fetish, and I'm attracted to body parts. I'm attracted to kind of erotic things, but not in a pornography way. But I kind of like because there are so many emotions in that word. So in that way, you're right. I can use that word myself.
It's hard, isn't it? Everyone's got a perspective on what something looks like and how to describe something, especially in an industry. People put things in boxes so they understand where to place them.
Totally. I really don't see myself as a photographer. A lot of my motives and my small worlds I'm creating comes from a simple perspective. Almost kind of creating these small kind of scenes where I'm in this no man's land between something that is created in the studio or the real world. If I'm shooting in a studio, I like to build a set and leave details that if I shot that on a location, I will retouch away. So if I'm doing something where I can build everything, I love to leave small scars or a stone in the shoe, so to describe it. And if I'm doing something that has more kind of like a real life location, reportage feel, I like to refine that. So I'm kind of pulling the 2 disciplines together in this weird no man's land. I know that was not the answer to your question about how to describe it, but I spoke to Maxine from Beauty Papers. She said that if I'm doing a monograph at some point, it should be called mundane because I'm attracted to things that are not obviously photogenic or beautiful. If I have a model or a character or a person in front of the camera, and that person needs to drink a cup of coffee. I love that the coffee cup is kind of a generic plastic cup and not a refined, beautiful, I like kind of the almost kind of like, having stuff in front of the camera that feels almost like a pictogram, almost like a child would draw the props so that the attention is towards the person more than the surroundings, so to speak.
It makes sense. It makes perfect sense.
Totally. Just to give you a little more answer to your question about the sexiness, I would say that maybe fetish is a better word because that can be sexy, but fetish for me is also just the things I'm super attracted to. That can also be a texture or a surface or a shape. I mean, sometimes it can be a naked body and sometimes it can be the right piece of a foam mattress Fetish for me is more accurate. I fall in love with objects or persons that has kind of, for me, fetish moments, and that can also be something that is not erotic or sexy, but just the love for a color. I'm obsessed with, the posted yellow, for example. That's kind of a fetish for me. I'm always kind of almost every time I'm shooting a story using that color somewhere, because that has that kind of, I feel safe and I feel sexy when I use bits and pieces like that, if that makes sense at all.
It does make a lot of sense, actually. I love it. I absolutely love it. Fetish. We're going to go with fetish instead. So here's the thing, right? Before we crack on, I would love to jump into your official bio.
Yeah.
And then I thought we could get into the unofficial one.
Yeah.
If that's cool.
Sounds good.
Casper, you're a photographer and a director in fashion, film, fine art, and commercial spaces. Your work portrays human frailty and the psychology of sensuality. You've contributed to numerous editorials over the past decade for international publications including Dazed and Confused, Beauty Papers, Vogue, Dust, Document Journal, and Acne Papers, as well as working with fashion brands including Alexander McQueen, Helmut Lang, Acne, Dries Van Noten, Burberry, Gucci, Missoni, Kenzo, Fendi, Louis Vuitton, and Dior, to name a few. Your approach to editorial and commercial work, and I love this, foregrounds a particular type of psychologically charged muse. And accordingly, you've worked with talent that includes the likes of Harry Styles, Kate Moss, Tilda Swinton, Billie Eilish, Charlotte Gainsbourg, Willem Dafoe, Kirsten Dunst, and of course, Cate Blanchett. You also publish zines, books, you've created your own merch line, you've directed series for Danish TV, and you've recently exhibited your works at the Juice Gallery in Antwerp. All of that is seriously impressive, but what your official bio doesn't reveal is how you got here. The first question is, when's the last time somebody read a bio back to you?
Never, I think.
Was it weird?
It's super weird because a big part of me still don't believe that I'm doing what I'm doing. There was a lot of name dropping and I was just like, oh yeah. And then when I heard the titles, characters, brands and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, of course I have done that, but I don't think about it like that. It's just like the next project takes the next project and I'm just glad that I'm doing what I'm doing. It's Laura, it's weird to have you read that. Yeah.
I wanted to ask what you did before photography and sort of how you entered into photography, if that's cool.
From the beginning.
Yes.
I'm Danish. I grew up in northern Jutland, Denmark, in an industrial town called Aalborg in the middle of the 80s. It was kind of like the Danish Liverpool. It's a big shipyard, a concrete factory.
Nice.
It's where they made the aquavit, the schnapps brewery was there. So it was a pretty rowdy place at that time.
Yeah.
I went to high school there and I played drums in different bands. I really wanted to be a musician. So the day after high school, I moved to Copenhagen. Half of the band I was playing with also moved because we thought we were going to be rock stars in Copenhagen, in the big city of Copenhagen.
Fucking brilliant.
Yeah, exactly. I had all kinds of jobs to pay my rent and to pay for a new drum kit. I worked in kindergartens and as a night watch at a hospital. And at some point I shared an apartment with 3 other guys, and one of them, her big brother, was a commercial photographer.
Right.
And I desperately needed a new brass snare drum, so he hired me to paint his backdrops, clean his studio, and so on. And he had a very nice vinyl collection and a very fancy espresso machine. So
Yep.
I was just maybe I should be a photographer. So I kind of, I started with him, assisting without any clue about what it was to be a photographer. I had never had a camera in my hand before that. Soon I just found out that, okay, I want to do that. That's almost kind of similar to doing music. It has a little bit of the same language in a way, but, he was not that good a photographer. And then I found out that there were 3 photographers in Copenhagen that I really liked, commercial photographers. So I made that little list, went to the first of them, and then that guy I also work for him. He's a shitty photographer. Come and work for me instead. So we had that kind of weird bond. Yeah. And he was a really, really, really good commercial photographer. He did big car campaigns and beer campaigns. It was very technical. It was not artistic, but it was kind of, high-end technical photography.
Amazing exposure to that world.
Totally. Yeah. He was a workaholic. Basically, me and the 2 other assistants, we lived at the studio. We had, I had a sleeping bag because at least 2 days a week, we had to sleep 3 hours on the studio floor, because we worked and worked and worked. It was pre-digital, pre-Photoshop, so everything had to be in camera. Everything was shot on 8x10 transparency films and
Amazing.
darkroom work and handprints. And even though it was kind of, just a still life or a pack shot of something, it was still shot in that way. And we made handprints. I was lucky to do that. But he had too many jobs, so he said no to jobs. He was also a little kind of grumpy towards clients. So I took over a lot of his clients when I was done with my education, because the clients knew that I could do the same as him. So
they'd met you anyway.
Exactly. Yeah. So I started, and I was lucky and unlucky at the same time to have a good career from the beginning. Good from a financial perspective when you were young, but a little unlucky from a creative perspective, because when I worked for him, I didn't have any time to do my own stuff.
Yeah.
And then when I started on my own as a commercial photographer in Copenhagen, I didn't have a clue about what my style was, because I did everything. Insurance campaigns, beer campaigns, and a little bit of fashion here. And it was all over the place.
Yep.
So I didn't have a clear view about what I wanted to do. And all my heroes bought Vogue Italia every month. There was always a Stephen Marcel cover and a Peter Lindbergh story. And, all my heroes, I could never see myself do that. It was kind of like a parallel world. There was no agents in Denmark, there was just, so I lived day to day on commercial jobs. And then at some point I was just fed up, and I want to do something else.
Yeah.
I had almost in my brain realized that, okay, I want to quit this because I was tired and frustrated about it.
But a very sort of like true artist story. If you have more time to think, you panic. Or you feel like you can't dream because you're wondering where the next thing's going to come from.
Yeah.
But when you're back to back, you don't have time to dream in the first place.
Exactly. I would say when my photographic career changed to what I'm doing today, I had to go back to when I was trying to be a musician in the beginning.
Amazing.
Because I've pinned myself into a corner where I had all the commercial jobs, and it was fine, but kind of suddenly I couldn't see myself. The frustration I had with doing all the commercial job. It pays my rent today, but now it's the kind of commercial jobs that I really want to do. Back then, sometimes I made a picture and then I was just, is that me or is that another person who did that? Anymore, I wanted to do something else, and I just played with the thought of, what could I do? Could I open a little cafe? What should I do? And then it was almost like karma. When I had the thought about I could do something else, maybe I don't need to be a photographer, then the right job came in.
Brilliant.
And I could just see that job had a potential to kind of totally change my whole career and to do what I, secretly have been dreaming about as a photographer.
What was the mindset shift? Did you step away from where you were at? Where did that come from for you?
It basically, it came from some personal stuff in my life at that time. My wife got sick. She's totally over it now,
Oh,
which is
thank God.
super good. But I could just see that there was a big change on its way. And it was, I think, her being ill was part of me daring to take the risk, because I also wanted her to be proud of what I was doing. But I was so lucky to get that Nymphomaniac Lars von Trier gig. I could see it was kind of, I mean, it sounds like the biggest cliche. I could just see that that assignment was kind of the light in the end of the tunnel. If I'm doing this right in the way I want it and not what an art director wanted me to do or a brand wanted me to do, then I could go on the track I really wanted.
Yeah.
At that time. Yeah.
So what happens? You get a phone call out of the blue? Or did you meet in a bar? Or what was the
No,
circumstances?
there was an art director couple here in Copenhagen. I've been doing some commercial stuff for them, and they were hired by Lars to do the Nymphomaniac campaign.
Right.
And I had to get approved by Lars to do that. So I know that he has seen some of my pictures, and Lars trusted these two art directors. It was a collective thing in a way, but the really defining thing was the campaign with the orgasmic portraits of the whole cast. But I mean, Lars's producer and Lars wanted me to read the manuscripts before I did the campaign. It was sent to me on paper, and it was 300 pages, and it made like a novel, not like a normal shooting script. It was pure literature. And I could see that, okay, the humoristic campaign, that it was so funny and so bizarre to see all these stars having orgasms in that. But after I have read the whole script, I wanted to do my own take on that manuscript as an art book, and do almost this kind of encyclopedia of the nymphomaniac's minds, because, I mean, she's a nymphomaniac, going back to that fetish and sexy thing, but she could also have been a violin player or a painter or whatever. It's all about passion and about kind of really wanting to do something with her life.
Yeah.
I called Lars's producer, Louise, and said, I want to do this book. I want to do my own kind of project about that. They hadn't started to shoot the film at that point. And Louise was just immediately saying to me, forget about that. You will be interfering with his art. And I was just, but all the film still books are behind the scenes books.
Yeah.
And I don't want to do that. I have never ever seen a book based on the scripts, almost like a parallel thing to the film. And she was just, no, forget about that, because you can't do that. And I was just, okay, yeah, that was silly of me to ask her. And then she called me back 2 days after and said, presented the idea to Lars. He loves the idea. You can do whatever you want. He only has one question, because he hates when he is interfered by producers about his art. So you can take it away, but he don't want to have anything to do with it before he has the final result in his hands.
Wow, that's a gift.
It was a gift.
There's such a trust there. Go be free, go create. That was everything you were wanting at that point.
Exactly.
Did it feel how you thought it was going to feel?
Totally. And I must say that it was so weird, because that was the first project where I really could feel deep in my bones that I want to do this. The book is full of pictures of the cast, shot in my way, but it's also a lot of nature motifs and artifacts as still lifes in my own studio. When I did all the pictures, Laura, I don't know how to describe it, but it was almost like kind of, I just knew on forehand how the pictures would look. I had everything kind of lined up in my brain in a way I never had it before, where I could just see, okay, this is what I want to do. This is my colors. This is my visual language. And then after I have done the pictures, I also worked together with one of my good friends, Cecile, who did the text for the book. We did so much research on the script and why the Nymphomaniac was attracted to the Fibonacci code or specific trees, all these nerdy things. And she found out, that there was so many kind of hidden small things from Lars' side. So we did all that research on our own to make a little weird appendix to the film. And then we presented it to Michael Mack from Mack Books, and he published the books after that. It was such a hard process, but such a good experience.
It sounds weirdly cathartic as well. So Lars and Louise opened your world. They opened the door.
But they did, and it was so. I've always loved Lars's films. I kind of like been obsessed with that.
What was that like to present your piece back to somebody that you admired?
In the end, it felt very natural, but I just wanted to give the very, very, very best, because Lars' film he did when he went to film school in Denmark has been such a great inspiration for me. All the frames, all the pictures there are so amazing. It sounds silly. I just wanted to show that guy that, I can do something with respect for your vision, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Absolutely. They say don't meet your heroes, but that sounded like a complete opposite of that.
Yeah. No, it is. And I have shot him several times since that. I love him. He's a genius. He's the weirdest, funniest, most kind of, everything. Be super cruel. He can be everything. I have so much respect for him.
Thank you for sharing so much about that process, because people refer to moments in your career, things you've made, said, things that you do or you've done.
Yeah.
But it's actually the story behind that story that says more about the person.
That's true. There's so many weird things at that moment, because for the book, I have always been obsessed with Charlotte Gainsbourg, and she was a part of the book, and I shot her for it. I was overwhelmed shooting her because she was one of them. She was on the bucket list.
Bucket list was answered day one of your new creative world. Wow.
No, but it was so funny because after we finished the book and before it was published, I went to Greece with my family. We stayed at a little place where there was no Wi-Fi. So once a day, I went to this kind of parking lot up on a little hill to check my mail. One of the days, there was a mail from self-service. I've always loved self-service, and I was just about to kind of delete it because I thought, another one of the newsletters. And then it was from Marie-Amélie Sauvé, the guest editor of issue 41 of Self-Service.
Wow.
And she was just asking me if I wanted to do one of the 5 portfolio stories and one of the 3 covers for the issue she was guest editor of.
Wow.
At that time, I didn't know who she was. So I drove back to the house and showed my wife. My wife, she's a stylist, so I showed her that mail and she was like, what? You got a mail from her? That's crazy. And I wrote back to her, and the day after I had a call with her, and then she said, yeah, because Nicolas Ghesquière is the new designer at Louis Vuitton, and I want you to shoot a full Louis Vuitton story with his first collection with Charlotte as the model. I want a cover with me and Charlotte, a double portrait. I mean, I have never asked Charlotte. I have shot her a couple of times after that. But I have a feeling it came from her because of the pictures from that book. But I don't know. But in a way, I just bypassed the whole system in that way with that. So, Laura, it's just to tell you that year, there was so many weird things happening.
Clearly.
That just, sent everything off in a good way. And then my old agent contacted me after that self-service story where she was just, should we have a meeting? Because when I Google you, there is some local Danish commercial stuff, and then there is a self-service cover, and it doesn't make any sense. Shouldn't we clean up and get you on the right track? So I was just, okay. This is what I want to do.
What do you put that down to? Right place, right time, magic, just creating space?
I don't know.
Because that's a pretty wild story. It's almost like you made the decision and it happened in quite a short time frame.
I think maybe there are 2 stories. Maybe it's just about shooting the right project and doing that right can kind of put you on the right track. So that's kind of the simple version of the story. And then another version is more holistic, and maybe it's just about if you don't want things too hard, then things are coming your way if you're trying too hard to do something. Because I've also, the last 10 years, been kind of like, okay, I really want to do this. Then you can almost be too focused. Sometimes you have to let go.
Yeah.
Open the channels in a way. I know it sounds very holistic.
No, but it is. I mean, it's true. It's so we sort of say it and sort of smile, but in a lot of ways, without that, actually nothing changes. Something has to die in order to create space for something new, you know?
Totally. Yeah.
So, Casper, when we first spoke about you coming onto the show, you actually suggested we could use some photos as a jumping off point, which I absolutely loved. You've curated a few. I got them earlier today, and unsurprisingly, they're bloody bold. Just a note to our listeners, you can also see the pictures that we're talking about. Just go to the episode show notes for a link and you can view them all there. My first thought, if I've got to be totally honest with you, was basically, how the fuck did you get Cate Blanchett to wear a banana strap on? But also, I love that it plays into the yellow.
Yeah.
You just told us the yellow. So that's why I was sort of smiling cheekily, but what's the deal?
I mean, that was what I was trying to describe with the fetish and pictogram images before, because a banana for me is, it's such a kind of, iconic object from Velvet Underground. There's also a reason why the taped banana now has been all over the media. It's just a banana it's so beautiful, but it also so funny and also, again, sexy. Story with Cate was that I had a list of different artists that I really liked, or iconic moments in art history. So I sent that list so we knew on the day that she was kind of into everything. At that point, Cate wanted to challenge herself. I was lucky to catch her in the right moment like that.
There's a lot of trust exchange.
Yeah. The story was for beauty papers.
Right.
Maxine, the editor, wanted to highlight Cate's makeup artist, Morag Ross, who has been kind of, helping Cate for many years. I loved that approach because it was almost like we had one of the biggest actresses, superstars in front of the camera, but in a way, it was also about her makeup artist. So it was a generous thing from Cate's side. She trusted Morag. We showed her a couple of the first pictures we did, and then she could see that it's going fine. We had her for, I can't remember how many hours, and I wanted to do 10 different characters of her on the day. And then I could just see that when we had 15 minutes left, we still missed 2 of the characters. And I said, but we have enough. And then Cate was, no, you planned 10. I want to do that.
Let's keep going.
Let's keep going. Yeah. But I think that's a general thing with all positions, whether it's the best makeup artist, hairdressers, set designers, talents, musicians, actresses, and so on. The really big ones are super collaborative.
Yeah.
Because they know what it takes to make a good picture, song, or whatever the art is. I have experienced that the bigger the stars are in front of my camera, the more humble or professional they are.
I totally agree from sort of my experience and perspective also. I'm very lucky. I've also had the opportunity a few times to work with her. And what do you think that's about?
I think it comes from all the hours it takes to be good at something. I remember years ago, I saw an interview with Steven Spielberg where the interviewer asked him, what is your kind of, what is your advice for a new director? He said, wear comfortable shoes. I mean, there's so many other things. There's a lot of people that think, in fashion, or if you shoot celebs or these kind of cultural stars, that it's all about kind of attitude and glam and so on, but it's not.
Okay, so just out of interest as well, sorry, I'm sort of pushing on this a little bit, but do you find when you're sending these kind of references, is it more like, okay, let's play, let's sort of really go there, and that's sort of the way that people enter, or is there ever like a hard no? Like, I'm not comfortable with that. I love the idea, but I don't think it's me.
I try to have the answers about these things on forehand, with the treatment I'm sending. So we are not having kind of no's on the day. Of course, you have to respect people's mood or emotions on the day, but I think it's better to kind of, get all the boxes ticked on forehand so you know what you can do and what you not can do. With celebrities, it's sometimes the problems can be caused more of the people around them.
Yeah.
Managers, publicists, they want you to wear this dress.
Yeah.
You don't want to wear this. And I've experienced a couple of times with A-list celebs. It was easier when the publicist left. I had it with a celeb where the publicist had to leave for a flight earlier, and then suddenly I had an hour with the talent on my own, and then they was just like, let's go for it.
Yeah.
Sometimes that structure around a talent or a celeb can be more kind of problematic.
Totally. I love that you've said that. I couldn't say that in the moment. You needed to say it, but I feel like anybody listening that knows, it's like, if you know, that's exactly that. That's when people come alive, when there isn't that protective ring around them. If they didn't want to be there, they wouldn't be.
No.
If they don't want to play, they won't play. But ultimately, there's so much trust. People are really excited to collaborate, and they typically want to, but they want to feel like they've got someone to really rally with. And when you find that collaborator to rally with, the gates open.
Exactly. But it's also important for me that the person in front of my camera feels safe. I would never cross any borders or come up with something that wasn't planned unless I could feel that they were really into it.
Yeah.
That safe space is really important to have.
The pictures that you sent earlier?
Yeah.
There are 12 images, I believe.
Yeah.
They are all different. Is there one in particular you want to talk about specifically?
The reason I sent these motifs was because I do like to see myself in the middle of a triangle: commercial work, editorials, and personal art projects.
Yeah.
I like to have a little bit of everything in all the projects. So sometimes when I do personal projects, I love to treat that almost in a commercial way. And I try to put art into my commercial stuff, and I try to be a little all over when I do editorials. I mean, I have had a lot of discussions with assistants, because when assistants come to me and say, have a look at my portfolios, a lot of them comes with two different portfolios. They come with one with color pictures with logos on, and then a lot of black and white pictures. But what do you want? Well, why? And all the artists, also whether it's sculptures or painters, or Andy Warhol is the most cliche example you can come up with. I love artists that has a little bit of everything in them. It's the same when you do an exhibition. I would rather do a pop hit, so I know that a lot of people come and see the pictures, instead of the very right 12 people in an underground gallery. And the same with kind of when I'm doing fashion photography. It's such a strong media. If you have the right client, you can almost come with a message on top of something very commercial. So I'm trying to massage a little bit of everything into the dough. And the reason why I sent you this selection is that there are a lot of fashion photographers that really loves fashion, that is really into the whole fashion thing. I am more into the cultural part of fashion. It's the same with influencers. Influencers, for me, is people who are really good at something. So, for example, when I shoot Cate Blanchett with a banana, she's still wearing Gucci. And for me, that kind of cultural icon and the reference to Andy Warhol, Velvet Underground cover, that is fashion to me. I think, people who are the real influencers are people who is kind of good at something that you look up to in a way. So I'm trying to do that when I do fashion. For example, one of the pictures I sent to you, that's a black and white picture of a boy in a tuxedo.
I'm looking at it.
Yeah, that's my son.
Really?
And during COVID, I did a story for another where Katie Shillingford and Ellie Grace Cummings, they sent me boxes with different objects and clothes, amazing stuff, with new stuff, but also with archive stuff. And Leo, my son, he's wearing Truman Capote's Dunhill tuxedo he had on when he had the black and white ball. That's a piece of fashion culture. There was even kind of, in the inner sleeve, there was kind of still a cigarette butt, a Truman, So it was kind of, and when I feel fashion, it's when I have moments where it's so iconic, whether it's Charlotte Gainsbourg with her history and her mom and dad, and her fashion DNA in front of the camera, or my son wearing a Truman Capote thing, I mean, there's many ways to do fashion photography, but I think the power in kind of looking at something that will be a part of the history. It was when I also did, I'll come back to the pictures I've sent to you, but I also did a story with Ellie in the spring where we shot the latest Margiela couture story with Chris McMenemy. And it was the same. Everybody looked at that collection. That was the show from that season. And then fashion becomes history and becomes that cultural thing. And I am super fascinated with having a big audience, but still have something that can be very artful or very edgy.
Amazing. Does Leo, do you share your references with him? Does he know what he's wearing?
No.
He looks amazing. Obviously, he's striking and gorgeous. But does he know Truman Capote is, or was he sort of conscious of that, or was he just like helping Dad with a COVID project?
He was helping. I've shot him several times. He has been, when he was 10, he was walking around in Balenciaga stilettos at the Barbican. I like that. And it's the same with the baby girl. That was one of the pictures from the Belongs to Joe, my Lars von Trier, the Nymphomaniac book. That's my daughter when she was 5 seconds old. I had 3 frames with her. I was allowed to bring a piece of background and a little flash setup and a camera. When people see it, some people kind of think that it looks super brutal because you're not actually aware about how a newborn baby look. For example, she's wrinkled, blue. There's blood all over. There is kind of still the scissor on it. I had this piece of fabric with me to the hospital that I have shot a lot of the artifacts for the book. So all the pictures for the book, for the Nymphomaniac book, was shot on these kind of pale suede. The colors on that, the whole thing, that's again kind of like, Laura, I'm not saying it's a fashion picture at all, but it's kind of, it still have that kind of...
No, it's an art picture, Casper. It's artistic.
Yeah. And again, it has this kind of, going back to what I said in the beginning, it has that kind of pictogram feel to it. It's a baby, it's a newborn baby, boom, like that, It's the same with the portrait of Leo in that tuxedo. It's just like, boom, here it is. I love the banana. I love the tuxedo, I love the baby. I love when things are a little bit naive, cut out, set in stone, like kind of like this. Here it is.
Just to give more of a sense, as a Tilda Swinton image, another fiercely artistic collaborator.
Yeah.
What was the story around that?
Modern Weekly in China, they contacted me and asked if I wanted to shoot Tilda. And I've never heard about that magazine at that time, but I want to shoot Tilda. I would give my right arm to shoot her. She has always been such a hero to me, and I've always been so inspired about her roles, her, everything, her look, everything.
Yep.
She's such an icon. I just made a story with that. I found an old class Oldenburg poem about love. I divided the story into different love chapters, especially this one where she's standing with this 3D printed
Like a horse?
horse head. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because one of the sentences is a fast horse love chasing wind.
Wow.
And so it's just subtle. And I mean, it's also about inspiration, because we didn't use the poem one-to-one, but I just used it for my brief. So she knew what to do in the different pictures.
Which poem was it, Casper?
I can send you, so we can put a link up.
Yeah, amazing. That would be amazing. Just because these are like creative Easter eggs for people, a window into your mind.
Yeah, exactly. But I remember we talked about where inspiration comes from. My biggest inspiration is always poems or lyrics, because then I can see the pictures instead of looking at a photograph and say, I'm inspired of that, or I want to do that picture. Because I'm so afraid of stealing without knowing it instead of being inspired. So I'm trying to not to push it away, but so it's almost always words.
Yeah. You're taking lots of different elements from different places and you're bringing them together. How do you choose collaborators on that basis? Like, do you see something in their work that you can sort of understand the pieces of a puzzle that they've brought into something, or is it more of a conversation for you?
There's several answers to that question. I mean, first of all, I need to feel safe. A lot of my key collaborators are my friends. So I know that we are in an environment where everybody can make mistakes.
Yeah.
Because I think that when you're doing a project for a client, for example, you have to have a plan A and a plan B and a plan C. So you know that you will come home with something that can be approved. When you're prepped, mistakes are wonders and gifts. In a safe environment where you like the people around you, everybody feels safe so that they are not afraid of pushing the limits or making mistakes and doing things over again. So that's one answer. That it's also personality of the collaborators. That's the simple answer. The more difficult answer is that I don't really know why. For example, I have done some projects where there's a Danish composer, August Rosenbaum. I've been collaborating with him. I love his stuff. He's the best piano player. I mean, it's just I need to be in love with the collaborators.
I don't know his style. I'll look it up, and again we'll put a link in the show notes. But what's the element that attracts you to him?
It's because the touch he has and the way he does stuff is super poetic. I'm not talking about poetic like kind of soft and gentle, because it cannot be the opposite, but you know that there is a layer more. The same with a set designer like J.B. Bartlett. I love working with him. There's a depth you can't explain to make a good piece of art, whether music or sculpture or a photograph. There has to be a stone in the shoe. There has to be this side story that you don't know what is. And for example, with August's music, Jabez's set design, or a hairdresser like Gary Gill or Tim Mahoney, there is something where they just dive into the project in another way. So they imagine, who is this woman or this boy? So they kind of, make a structure that is not just a cool hairdo or a nice picture on a painted wall or something like that.
It's like building a world, a character, the layers.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And I must say, as we talked about with Cate, for example, as an actress, where you ask, how did you get the banana shot? It's the same when you have good persons around you. They are not into the project to show off. They are into the project because they are into the vision. And sometimes you can, once in a while, you can be with a team where everybody feels they need to show off. And then it's not good, because then it's just, a sandwich with triple cheese. And sometimes you need to let the makeup artist be the star, and then you just almost turn the light in the roof and just shoot in that. And then sometimes it's all about the light and everything else should be toned down. It's almost like mixing music, turn the bass up and the volume down. It's like cooking in that way. It's hard to define what I like, but I just like that extra thing going into the projects with, okay, this is the vision, this is the world we are building today. Yeah.
There's two last questions for you, if that's cool. The first question is, what's a personal project that you're working on that you haven't told anybody about yet?
Yes, I
don't want to put you on the spot.
No.
I don't know. You don't have to answer it. I don't want to put you on the spot.
I mean, there is a small little one now we are working on with all my local friends here in Copenhagen. I did a little publication with a Danish model, Ida Heiner, in the summer. It was launched during Paris Fashion Week. And then we are doing kind of the second leg to that, just a one-day shoot with Ida again, and there will be a little t-shirt collection with that again, just to have some kind of weird commercial work that feels more artistic. So that's a little thing I'm looking forward to. I have started to think about, I would love to work on a monograph where I look back at what I've been doing the last 10 years, but do a remix of that.
Oh, amazing.
Would I have done that selection today? What should have been the colors on that picture if it was today? So have a totally fresh look at your work. Not too serious, not like, oh, you can't change that because it was meant to be like that, but just a remix version of some of the stuff.
Amazing. Casper, that's such a cool project. I love the nods back to music. You mentioned remix and merch. It's very music-centric. Once a drummer, always a drummer. Music is in your bones.
Yeah. And I know that we are both drummers, and I have a primitive answer to why I think I made the switch from being a drummer to a photographer.
Come on.
Basically, it's just because I love stands. You know, a simple stand and a tripod. And, you know, I just love, I also have a fetish for gear.
Well, this is how it all started. When you did you mention at the beginning that you were trying to buy a new snare drum?
Exactly.
And that's how you ended up in the photo studio.
Exactly.
Basically.
Exactly.
Amazing. Listen, just in the spirit of sort of creative freedom, creative expression, artistic integrity, this sort of 360 of creativity, is there anyone that comes top of mind that you think once we say goodbye to each other, I should get on speed dial? Sort of like a bit of a baton, like a pass it on.
I would say I love Collier. I love Collier Shaw. I can always see when it's one of her pictures. And again, when you talk to me about collaborators, she has the same. I can't explain what it is, but there is something that touches me.
Listen, Collier, if you're listening, I'm coming for you in a good way. That's amazing.
Yeah. I just have such deep respect for what she's doing. She's so consistent and so kind of, you know, she has that kind of punk attitude. She don't give a fuck in a way.
Let's all not give a fuck, because the best work comes out of not giving a fuck. The fact that you say that means that you do.
Exactly.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Kev, what's the Danish goodbye?
Farvel.
Casper. Farvel.
Farvel. Speak soon.
If you enjoyed this episode, don't miss a single drop by subscribing and following the Creative Blood podcast. You can also head over to creativeblood.com, where you'll find even more inspiration from pioneering creative disruptors in fashion, music, film, art and entertainment. Let's get all these conversations out there and shared with fellow creatives. These episodes were crafted by the brilliant humans at Creative Blood and Scenery Studios. Thanks for listening.
I am Casper Sejersen, and you have been listening to the Creative Blood podcast.